There is a moment roughly halfway through Kung Fu Soccer where the camera just holds. It holds on Shuang's face after she's just done something on the pitch that should not be physically possible. Her teammates are screaming around her, the crowd is a blur of noise and color, and she's standing completely still, breathing hard, her eyes wide like she just realized she broke something she can't fix. And in that single, breathless frame, you understand exactly what kind of movie you are watching, something that shouldn't work as well as it does, something that keeps daring you to laugh and then makes you feel things instead, something that knows its own absurdity and uses it like a weapon. Welcome back to Jonota News, everyone. We need to talk about this movie, and I mean really talk, because Kung Fu Soccer is not what the trailers told you it would be, and that is both the best and most complicated thing about it. If you are new here, first of all, I'm glad you clicked. Do consider subscribing if you enjoy long, honest deep dives into film and drama, because that's what we do, every single time. And fair warning, I'll be walking through this one with moderate spoilers, so I'll talk about major turns and character dynamics, but I'll try to preserve the bigger surprises if you haven't seen it yet. That said, this is a movie that honestly benefits from knowing less going in, so if you are on the fence, maybe bookmark this, go watch it, and come back. I'll be right here. Let me set the stage, because the premise itself is doing a lot of heavy lifting and you need to understand the world this film builds before anything else lands. We are in a near-contemporary setting, think somewhere between the stylized martial arts universe of something like Kung Fu Hustle and the grounded, sweat-and-grass world of women's football in Asia. The AMA team, and yes, the name is doing exactly the mythological work you think it is, drawing from the AMA school of Chinese martial arts tradition, enters the Asian Women's Champions League as complete underdogs. Nobody's watching. Nobody's picking them. The early scenes paint this picture with a kind of bruised tenderness, showing us a team that's talented but fragmented, hungry but directionless, full of heart but missing something that turns effort into magic. And right there, in that gap between potential and performance, the movie plants its story. Captain Shuang is our entry point, and from the very first scene she's in, you understand why this role had to be played with exactly the right energy or the whole thing collapses. She's not the flashiest player. She's not the one making impossible kicks or flying through the air in slow motion, at least not yet. What she is, in these early passages, is a leader who feels the weight of every loss, every missed opportunity, every teammate who looks to her and doesn't quite find what they need. There's a quietness to her that the film earns through small, specific moments, the way she tapes her own ankles before anyone arrives at the practice field, the way she watches game footage alone at night with the sound off, the way she stands at the edge of the team huddle and lets the younger players have their energy before stepping in to focus them. She carries herself like someone who's been told she's not enough and has decided to prove otherwise through sheer, grinding persistence rather than flair. And then Qiu Feng enters the picture. Her senior brother, and I want to dwell on this dynamic for a second because it's the emotional skeleton the entire film hangs on. In the world of this movie, the relationship between a senior martial arts figure and a junior disciple carries a specific weight, a blend of mentorship, familial obligation, rivalry, and something that borders on romantic tension without ever quite becoming that. Qiu Feng and Shuang share a history that the film reveals gradually, in fragments, through glances and half-finished sentences and one devastatingly well-choreographed flashback that I'll get to later. He's older, more experienced, carries his own wounds from a competitive past that the script is smart enough not to over-explain. When he agrees to help train the AMA team, to inject his kung fu methodology into their football strategy, the movie clicks into a gear that it sustains for a remarkable stretch. The training sequences are where Kung Fu Soccer first shows you what it's actually capable of, and honestly, they're some of the most entertaining filmmaking I've seen in a sports movie in a long time. There's a playfulness to the way director and choreographer blend traditional martial arts stances, footwork, and energy principles with soccer technique that feels genuinely inventive rather than gimmicky. You see Shuang learning to channel a Wing Chun-style centerline focus into her ball control, and it doesn't look like a joke, it looks like an athlete discovering a new physical vocabulary. There's a scene where Q Feng teaches the midfielders to read opponents the way a martial artist reads an incoming strike, anticipating body shifts and weight transfers, and the film cuts between his kung fu demonstration and their application of it on the pitch with this rhythmic precision that makes you feel the connection viscerally. The editing here deserves enormous credit, because it could easily have felt cheesy or disconnected, but instead it flows with this almost musical logic, each cut landing on the beat of movement, training montage energy without the typical montage shortcuts. What makes this stretch of the film sing, though, isn't just the choreography or the concept, it's the relationship between Shuang and Q Feng during these sessions. There's an energy between them that the actors play with extraordinary restraint. He pushes her, hard, sometimes unreasonably hard, and she pushes back, and in those moments of friction, you see something that transcends teacher-student. You see two people who understand each other's bodies and competitive spirits at a level that most people never reach with another human being. There's a sparring scene, and this is the one I alluded to earlier, that takes place at dawn on a rooftop training ground overlooking the city, and it is just gorgeous filmmaking. The light is this pale, golden wash, almost monochromatic, and the camera pulls back to give them space, letting their movements fill the frame naturally. The sound design drops away to almost nothing, just their breathing, the slap of feet on concrete, the whisper of fabric through air, and it becomes this intimate, almost sacred exchange. They're not fighting. They're communicating. Every block and counter is a sentence, every pause a punctuation mark. And when it ends, when they both stop at the same moment, breathing hard, faces flushed, there's this look between them that says everything the script never needs to. It's the kind of scene that makes you lean forward in your seat without realizing you've done it. Now, I want to pause here and say something that might sound like a contradiction, but bear with me. The early to middle section of Kung Fu Soccer, this stretch where the team is coming together and Q Feng is transforming their game and Shuang is blossoming as both a leader and a martial artist, this is the best part of the movie. I know that sounds premature. I know we haven't even gotten to the conflict yet. But there's a purity to these scenes, a joy in watching competence and trust and physical mastery develop, that the film never quite recaptures once the fractures begin. And I think that's intentional. I think the movie wants you to fall in love with what's being built so that when it breaks, you feel the loss personally. But I also think, and here's where my feelings get complicated, that the film is so good at building this world of mutual growth and beauty that when it tears it down, the reconstruction feels slightly less assured. We'll get there. But first, the transformation. Because once Q Feng's training takes root, the MMA team becomes something genuinely thrilling to watch on the pitch. The matches in this midsection are staged with a kinetic energy that walks this perfect tightrope between realistic football and heightened martial arts spectacle. The choreography department clearly studied real women's football, the spatial dynamics, the way a great midfield moves in concert, the physics of headers and sliding tackles, and then layered on top of it this martial arts sensibility that makes each play feel like a combat sequence. There's a match against a heavily favored Japanese club that is, I'm not exaggerating, one of the best sports sequences I've seen committed to film. The MMA team plays with a fluidity and intuition that looks choreographed in the way a great dance number looks choreographed. You know it's rehearsed to perfection, but it still feels spontaneous, alive, dangerous. Shuang, in particular, moves through the match like water finding its path, and the camera tracks her with this handheld urgency that pulls you into her perspective. You feel the spaces opening. You feel the timing clicking. You feel the moment when she decides to take the shot, and the way the film slows time just enough, not to Matrix levels, just a breath, a heartbeat, before she strikes, and the sound design focuses everything into the impact of boot on ball, and then the roar of the crowd floods back in. It's electric. I got actual goosebumps. I'm not too proud to admit that. And here's something I want to note because it connects to a broader conversation about sports films and how they handle women's athletics. Kung Fu Soccer does something quietly revolutionary with its match sequences. It never once treats these women as lesser athletes. There's no scene where a male character watches in disbelief as women perform at a high level. There's no wink at the camera, no condescension, no qualifier. The MA team's skill is presented as what it is, extraordinary, hard-won, and worthy of being filmed with the same cinematic reverence that male sports films have always received. The camera loves these players' bodies not as objects but as instruments of power and precision. The slow-motion sequences highlight the musculature, the sweat, the strain, the explosive force in their legs and core. It's unapologetic, and it matters. In 2026, you'd think this wouldn't feel like a revelation, but here we are, and the film handles it with such natural confidence that it never feels like a statement, it just feels like the only honest way to tell this story. The victories start stacking up. The team that nobody predicted, that nobody even paid attention to in the opening rounds, starts becoming the story of the tournament. And the film captures the intoxicating, slightly dizzying energy of sudden success with real emotional intelligence. There's a montage, and look, I'm usually a montage skeptic, I think most films use them as shortcuts, but this one works because it's layered with something more than just, they won, then they won again. You see the team bonding in hotel rooms, playing cards, braiding each other's hair, laughing until someone snorts. You see Shuang and Qiu Feng in quieter moments, reviewing strategy, but also just being together, existing in each other's space with an ease that feels earned. You see the media attention arriving, the interviews, the growing crowd sizes, the shift in energy from nobody cares to everybody's watching, and you see how that change starts to create tiny, almost invisible cracks in the team dynamic. A look held a second too long. A joke that doesn't land. A moment of individual brilliance that draws praise and, just beneath it, the faintest whisper of jealousy. The film plants these seeds so delicately that you might not even register them consciously the first time through, but they're there, and they're growing. Now, here's where I need to be honest about something, because this is a review and not a love letter. There's a moment in the mid-portion of the film where the script makes a choice that I think is the first real stumble, and it's a stumble that echoes through the rest of the narrative. Qiu Feng's past starts catching up with him. We learn, through a subplot that involves a rival coach or a figure from his competitive history, and I want to be careful here because the film handles this thread with varying degrees of clarity, that his own career ended under circumstances that carry shame, or at least unresolved conflict. The specifics are doled out in a way that I think is meant to create tension and deepen his character, but it occasionally tips into vagueness. You get the sense that the film wants to tell you more than it can comfortably fit. And so some of the connective tissue around Qiu Feng's backstory feels like it was either trimmed in editing or never fully fleshed out in the script. He becomes, in certain scenes, more of a function than a person, a vessel for the plot's need to create disruption rather than a fully dimensional character making choices from a place we understand. That said, the performance saves a lot of it. Whoever plays Qiu Feng, and I want to acknowledge that because the physicality alone is remarkable, brings a physical charisma and emotional opacity that makes you want to understand this person even when the script isn't fully giving you the tools. There's a scene where Shuang asks him directly about his past, and he deflects with humor, and she pushes, and he lets the humor drop for just a second, and in that second, you see everything, the shame, the anger, the desire to be better than he was, the fear that helping her team is repeating a pattern that ended badly before. It's all in the eyes, all in the microtension around the jaw, all in the way his hand moves toward hers and then stops. The actor makes you feel the full weight of a history that the screenplay only sketches in outline. That's the mark of a truly compelling screen presence, when the performance exceeds the writing. But the cracks are widening. And this is the part of Kung Fu Soccer where you start to feel the ground shifting beneath the characters, where the joy of the first half begins to curdle into something more complicated and more painful. The dispute that eventually drives Qiu Feng away from the team, and I want to talk about the mechanics of this without giving away every specific turn, because the exact shape of the rupture is something the film builds toward carefully, and I think it lands better if you experience its particular rhythm, is rooted in something that feels painfully real. It's not a cartoonish betrayal. It's not a misunderstanding that could be solved with one honest conversation. It's a genuine collision of values, of ego, of the way that success changes the chemistry of a group, and of the specific, complicated dynamics between a mentor who's given everything and a team that's starting to believe they did it themselves. This is, I think, the most interesting and also the most frustrating part of the film. Because the movie understands this dynamic intellectually. It knows that the erosion of gratitude is one of the most common and most human ways that relationships break down. It knows that when you help someone become great, there's a very human impulse in both directions, in the helper, a sense of ownership, in the helped, a desire to claim their achievement as their own. Kung Fu Soccer sees all of this, and it articulates it through character behavior and visual metaphor with genuine sophistication. But it also, and here's where I push back a little, rushes the actual rupture. The dispute that drives Q Feng out has the emotional weight of a season-long arc compressed into a few scenes, and while those scenes are individually well-acted and well-directed, the compression means you sometimes feel the plot pushing the characters rather than the characters pulling the plot. The turning point itself, though, when it hits hard. There's a confrontation scene in the locker room after a match that the MA team has won convincingly, and the contrast between the euphoria of victory and the devastation of this personal collapse is staged with real emotional brutality. The lighting shifts from the warm, golden tones that have characterized the team's triumphant scenes to something cooler, harder, more fluorescent. The sound design pulls the crowd noise down to a muffled, distant hum, and all you can hear clearly is the argument, which starts controlled and ends raw. Shuang and Q Feng face each other across this space that feels simultaneously too small and impossibly vast, and the camera alternates between close-ups that capture every micro-expression and wider shots that emphasize the isolation they both feel even as they're screaming at each other. And the rest of the team is there, watching, some with anger, some with confusion, some with the frozen stillness of people who know they're watching something they won't be able to undo. It's devastating. It's the kind of scene where you want to look away but can't. Now, here's my contrarian take, and I mean this with genuine respect for what the film is attempting. I think Q Feng's departure, as it's staged, is simultaneously the emotional peak of Kung Fu Soccer and its most flawed moment. Here's why. The film has spent its first half building a relationship between Q Feng and Shuang that is rich, textured, and specific. It's shown us what they mean to each other not through speeches but through action, through shared physicality, through the accumulation of small moments that feel real. And when the break comes, it's performed beautifully and directed with real skill. But the script doesn't quite earn the depth of the wound it inflicts. The dispute, as written, is somewhat abstract. It's about credit, about control, about the boundary between mentorship and dependency, and while these are rich thematic territories, the film explores them more in dialogue than in dramatic action. I wanted to see the specific, concrete incident that made this rupture inevitable. I wanted the inciting moment to feel as lived in and specific as the training scenes or the match sequences. Instead, it arrives with a slightly schematic quality, like the film is checking the conflict box on its dramatic outline rather than letting the conflict grow organically from everything we've seen. But, and this is a significant part, the emotional impact is undeniable. Because the performances are so committed, because we've spent enough time with these characters to care about them, because the film has built genuine love and trust between them, the break still lands like a gut punch even if the architecture beneath it isn't quite as solid as it should be. And that, in a way, is the story of Kung Fu Soccer as a whole, a film whose emotional reach consistently exceeds its structural grasp, and whose willingness to go for big feelings carries you over the rough patches even when your brain is registering the seams. After Q Feng's departure, the film enters territory that's darker and more uncertain than anything in the first half. And it's here that I think the movie makes its most daring and divisive choices. The MA team has to keep playing. They're deep in the tournament now, the stakes are enormous, and the thing that made them extraordinary, the fusion of Kung Fu and football, the training methodology that Q Feng brought, is suddenly complicated by the absence of the person who embodied it. The question becomes, was their transformation genuine, or was it borrowed? Can they sustain the magic without the magician? And for Shuang specifically, the question cuts even deeper. Did she become who she is because of Q Feng, or was what he gave her always something she already had? The way the film handles this period is, I think, the most divisive thing about it, because it's messy in a way that feels either brilliantly honest or slightly undercooked depending on your tolerance for narrative ambiguity. There's a stretch where the team struggles. They lose, or nearly lose, matches they should win. Players who were confident start second-guessing. The kung fu elements of their game, which once felt like extensions of their natural movement, become self-conscious, performative, like they're trying to remember steps rather than feeling the dance. And Shuang, who once moved through matches with this fluid, almost unconscious mastery, starts to hesitate. There's a moment where she's one-on-one with a goalkeeper, a situation she's converted 100 times in training, and she freezes. The camera holds on her face, and you can see the internal battle, muscle memory screaming shoot, doubt whispering what if you can't do this without him, and she takes one beat too long, and the window closes. It's excruciating. It's also, for my money, the most psychologically realistic depiction of athletic crisis I've seen in a martial arts film, because it's not about physical injury or external sabotage, it's about the loss of belief, which is the most insidious and the most invisible wound an athlete can suffer. The film uses sound design brilliantly in this stretch, by the way. I want to give credit where it's deeply due. Throughout the first half, the kung fu elements are accompanied by a specific sonic palette, the crack of technique meeting technique, the breath patterns, the almost musical percussion of controlled movement, and it's woven into the score so seamlessly that you don't consciously separate it. But after Q Feng leaves, those sounds start to feel off. They're still there, but they're slightly distorted, slightly hollow, like an echo in an empty room. The score, which has been building this soaring, triumphant energy, introduces these minor key undertones, these dissonant notes that you might not even notice on first listen but that create this pervasive sense of wrongness, of something fundamental having shifted. It's sophisticated, effective work from the sound team, and it communicates the emotional state of the team better than any dialogue could. There's another match, one of the later tournament games, that the film stages as a kind of mirror image of that earlier Japanese club match I mentioned. Same energy, same stakes, similar tactical setup. But this time, the AME team plays like shadows of themselves. The choreography is deliberately less fluid, less connected. Where the earlier match had this beautiful synchronicity of movement, this one has moments of individual brilliance interspersed with collective breakdowns. A pass that would have been instinctive before now arrives a half-second late. A defensive formation that was airtight now has gaps you could drive through. And the camera, which in the earlier match tracked the team as a single flowing organism, now cuts more sharply, isolating individual players, emphasizing the disconnection. It's a masterful piece of visual storytelling that communicates something is broken without a single word of exposition, and it shows a level of cinematic craft that elevates the film well above its genre expectations. Shuang's arc in this section is the engine that keeps you watching, because even as the team falters, her journey becomes more specific and more personal. She's dealing with the loss of Q Feng not just as a coach and mentor but as the person who saw her most clearly. There's a scene, and this is one of my favorite moments in the entire film, even though favorite feels like the wrong word for something this painful, where she goes back to that rooftop training ground from the dawn sparring scene. Same location, same time of day, but now she's alone. The camera frames her in the exact same positions that Q Feng occupied in that earlier scene, as if she's trying to inhabit his perspective, to remember what he saw, to reconstruct something from memory. She starts moving through the forms they practiced together, and at first it's fluid, her body remembering what her mind is grieving. But then she stumbles. Not physically, she doesn't fall, but something in her movement breaks, some internal thread snaps, and she just stops. Stands there. The wind moves her hair. The city noise drifts up from below. And she looks like the loneliest person in the world. The actress in this scene does something that I can only describe as channeling. She lets you see not just sadness but the specific texture of this particular sadness, which is the sadness of someone who's lost access to a part of themselves they thought was permanent. It's a devastating performance, and it's the kind of moment that reminds you why you watch films, not for plot, not for spectacle, but for these windows into human experience that feel so true they make your chest tight. Okay, I need to take a breath here because we are getting deep, and I want to make sure I'm not losing anyone. Let me pull back for a second and talk about some of the broader craft elements that I've been touching on but haven't given their full due. Visually, Kung Fu Soccer is a striking film. The cinematography has two distinct modes, and the transition between them mirrors the narrative arc with real precision. The first half is bathed in warmth, golden light, rich ambers and reds, wide lenses that make the world feel expansive and full of possibility. The frame compositions tend toward openness, with lots of negative space that gives the characters room to move, to breathe, to be. This visual language says, the world is big, there's room for you in it. You can become anything. And then, as the cracks form and Q Fing departs, the palette cools. Blues and grays creep in. The lighting becomes more directional, more shadowed. The compositions tighten. Walls start appearing in the background. Spaces that were open start feeling enclosed. It's not heavy-handed, it's a gradual shift that you feel more than see, and it's done with the kind of discipline that suggests a director who understands visual storytelling at a deep level. The editing, which I've praised in specific moments, deserves a broader commendation. Kung Fu Soccer has a rhythm that serves its story beautifully, and the editor clearly understands the difference between the rhythm of action and the rhythm of emotion. During matches, the cuts are rapid but never chaotic, each one lands on a moment of impact or decision, creating a kinetic flow that feels like playing the sport rather than watching it. During character scenes, the cutting slows dramatically, sometimes to the point where a single shot holds for a duration that feels almost daring in a film with this much physical spectacle. There's a scene between Shuang and one of her teammates, a younger player who's struggling with the team's identity crisis, that plays out in what feels like a single take. I'm sure there are hidden cuts, but the effect is of unbroken time, of two people in a room together with nowhere to hide, and the emotional honesty it produces is remarkable. The edit trusts the performance, trusts the viewer, trusts that sometimes the most powerful thing a camera can do is stay put and watch. The music, and I've hinted at this, is another area where the film both impresses and occasionally stumbles. The score, in its best moments, is genuinely innovative. It blends traditional Chinese instrumentation, irhu, pipa, guzheng, with modern electronic production and this driving, percussive energy that mirrors the fusion of kung fu and football at the heart of the story. During the training montages and early matches, the music is propulsive and joyful, with these soaring melodic lines that capture the feeling of athletic transcendence. It's the kind of score that gets into your body, that makes you want to move. But in the darker second half, it occasionally overplays its hand. There are moments where the emotional weight of a scene is already being carried beautifully by the performance and the visuals, and the score comes in with an additional layer of melancholy that feels like it's telling you what to feel rather than letting you discover it. It's a minor issue, but in a film that's otherwise so confident in its restraint, these moments of overscoring stand out. And speaking of confidence, let me talk about something that I think will be one of the most discussed aspects of Kung Fu Soccer among viewers and critics: its relationship with genre. This is a film that's being marketed primarily as a martial arts sports comedy, and it absolutely delivers on that promise in its first half. The humor is physical, well-timed, and rooted in character rather than situation. There's a running gag about one of the team's defenders who keeps trying to apply Tai Chi principles to her tackling and ending up in ridiculous positions that has no business being as funny as it is, because it's grounded in a character trait, her earnestness, her desire to contribute, that makes you care about her even as you are laughing at her. The comedy in these early sections feels organic, like it's emerging from the absurdity of the premise treated with total sincerity rather than from the film winking at itself. But as the drama intensifies, the humor doesn't entirely disappear, it transforms. Some of the team's lighter moments become tinged with sadness, like jokes told in a hospital waiting room, and the film handles this tonal shift with remarkable grace. There's a moment late in the film where the defender who was the butt of those Tai Chi jokes does something genuinely heroic, something that earns the same visual language the film has used for its most epic moments, and the comedy of her earlier scenes retroactively becomes something richer, the setup for a payoff that hits with unexpected emotional force. I want to take another moment here, because I realize I've been going deep on craft and theme, and I want to make sure I'm also being specific about what it feels like to watch this movie as a viewer, sitting in the dark, letting it wash over you. Kung Fu Soccer is, first and foremost, an experience. It's the kind of film that makes you lean forward, that makes you hold your breath during matches, that makes you laugh out loud at the physical comedy and then sit in stunned silence during the emotional scenes. It's the kind of film where you look at the person next to you, if you are watching in a theater, and see that their eyes are wet, and you realize yours are too, and neither of you says anything because the moment is too fragile to puncture with words. It's the kind of film that makes you angry, not at the film itself, but at the situation, at the characters' choices, at the unfairness of the world they inhabit, and that anger is a testament to how effectively the film has made you care. But I also want to be real about the experience of watching the second half, because I think honesty is more useful than enthusiasm. There's a stretch, maybe 20 minutes, maybe 25, where the film's pace flags. Not dramatically, not ruinously, but noticeably. The team's crisis of identity, while thematically rich, starts to repeat itself in variations that feel less like deepening and more like circling. Shuang's isolation, while powerfully performed, occasionally hits the same emotional note without enough variation to sustain the intensity. And the absence of Feng, while narratively essential, leaves a hole in the film's energy that the remaining characters, compelling as they individually are, can't entirely fill. It's the paradox of a well-drawn antagonist-mentor figure. When they leave, the screen feels emptier than it should, and the film has to work harder to fill that space. There's a subplot involving Shuang's family, her mother, specifically, and the expectations and traditions that shaped her before she ever stepped onto a pitch, that the film introduces in the middle section and develops with a gentleness that I found genuinely moving. Even though I think it could have been woven in more organically from the start. Her mother is a former martial artist, and there's this unspoken tension between them about what Shuang's path should have been versus what it became. The mother doesn't disapprove exactly, it's more nuanced than that, but there's a distance between them that speaks to the specific, culturally rooted ways that parental love can become a form of pressure. When Shuang visits her mother after Feng's departure, broken and uncertain, there's a scene in the kitchen that's staged with this naturalistic simplicity, no dramatic lighting, no swelling score, just a mother and daughter at a table, and the daughter trying to explain something she doesn't fully understand, and the mother listening with that particular stillness that tells you she understands more than she's saying. It's a small scene, maybe 3 minutes, but it adds a layer to Shuang's character that enriches everything that comes after, because you realize she's not just fighting for her team, she's fighting for her right to define herself in a world that's always had a plan for her. I should also talk about the team as a collective, because one of Kung Fu Soccer's quiet strengths is that it doesn't reduce its supporting cast to archetypes. Each of the MA players has at least one moment that feels specific and real, one beat that distinguishes them from the ensemble. The goalkeeper has this ritual before every match, a series of hand gestures that the film never fully explains but that clearly has personal meaning, and there's a late-game moment where that ritual becomes part of a larger, team-wide gesture of solidarity that is genuinely goosebump-inducing. The central midfielder, the one who's maybe the most naturally gifted player on the team, has a subplot about performance anxiety that the film treats with real sensitivity, showing how talent without confidence is like a sword without a grip. The blade is there, but you can't wield it safely. Even the coach, the team's official coach, separate from Feng, the one who was there before the Kung Fu element entered the picture, gets a dimensionality that surprised me. He's not threatened by Feng's presence, exactly, but he's aware of his own limitations, aware that he doesn't have the tools to take this team where it needs to go, and there's a dignity in his willingness to step back and let someone else lead that the film acknowledges without sentimentalizing. And the opponents. Kung Fu Soccer understands something that too many sports films forget: a great hero needs a great rival, and a rival needs to be more than just a collection of skills. The opposing teams in the later stages of the Champions League are drawn with enough specificity to feel like genuine threats. There's a South Korean team that plays with this brutal, mechanical precision that contrasts beautifully with the MA team's more organic, art-inspired approach. Their captain, and I wish the film had given her more screen time, has this icy composure that makes her feel like a final boss in the best possible way. When she and Shuang face off, there's a chemistry between them that goes beyond competition into something almost philosophical, to different ideas of what it means to be a great athlete, to different relationships to the sport, to different answers to the question of whether football is art or war. Their final confrontation, when it comes, is staged with the kind of mythic weight that makes you forget you are watching a sports movie and think you are watching an opera. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because I still have so much to cover before we get to the film's final act, and I want to make sure I'm giving proper attention to the things that are easy to overlook in the rush of narrative. The costume and production design, for instance, deserves a shout. The AMA team's kit, their uniform, evolves over the course of the film in subtle ways that mirror their transformation. The early versions are generic, functional, forgettable. As the kung fu influence takes hold, elements of traditional martial arts aesthetics start appearing, subtle patterns inspired by MA school motifs, a color palette that shifts toward the deep reds and golds associated with the martial tradition. It's not cosplay, it's not costume, it's integration, the visual expression of the same fusion happening on the pitch. And the opposing team's kits are designed with similar thoughtfulness, each one reflecting a different aesthetic philosophy that tells you something about how that team plays. It's the kind of world-building detail that most viewers won't consciously notice but that adds to the overall coherence of the film's visual identity. The production design extends to the settings as well. The AMA team's home ground, when we see it early in the film, is modest, a little rundown, with peeling paint and faded lines on the pitch. But the film photographs it with such affection, such warmth, that it becomes beautiful in the way that your childhood home is beautiful, not because it's impressive but because it's yours. The training facilities Q Feng establishes are deliberately modest too, a rooftop, a repurposed warehouse, a clearing near a temple, and these spaces develop their own visual character over the course of the film, becoming almost like characters themselves. When the team's success starts bringing attention and resources, they get access to better facilities, and the film frames this upgrade ambivalently. The new spaces are sleek and professional, but they lack the warmth and specificity of the earlier ones, and you feel, without it being said, that something intangible has been lost in the upgrade. Now, I've been building toward this, and I want to talk about one of the film's most fascinating structural choices, which is the way it uses the tournament bracket as a metaphor for the characters' internal journeys. Each round of the Champions League corresponds to a stage in the team's emotional development, and the escalating stakes of the tournament mirror the escalating stakes of the interpersonal drama. The early rounds, against weaker opponents, correspond to the early, joyful phase of the team's transformation. The middle rounds, against stronger competition, correspond to the peak of the Q Feng partnership and the first hints of the coming rupture. The later rounds, against elite opponents, correspond to the team's struggle to redefine itself after Q Feng's departure. And the final, well, I'll talk about that when we get there, because it's the most interesting game the film stages and the one that provokes the most complicated feelings. But I want to note something about this structure before we move on. It's elegant, it's emotionally logical, and it provides the film with a narrative framework that compensates for some of the screenplay's rougher patches. Because even when the dialogue stumbles, even when a subplot feels underdeveloped, the tournament structure keeps pulling you forward, keeps raising the stakes, keeps giving you a concrete, tangible measure of what the characters stand to gain or lose. It's the spine that holds the body upright even when some of the muscles aren't firing perfectly, and it's one of the clearest signs that the filmmakers understand both sports storytelling and dramatic storytelling at a deep level. I think at this point I need to address something that I've been dancing around, and it's something that will probably define the critical conversation around Kung Fu Soccer. Is this a sports movie, a martial arts movie, a drama, a comedy, or a love story? And the answer, frustratingly and beautifully, is that it's trying to be all of those things at once, and it mostly succeeds, but the places where the seams show are the places where those different genres pull in slightly different directions. The sports movie wants clear stakes and decisive outcomes. The martial arts movie wants spectacle and philosophy. The drama wants ambiguity and interiority. The comedy wants release and absurdity. The love story, and yes, I'm calling it that, even though the film is careful never to make the relationship between Shuang and Q Feng explicitly romantic, wants intimacy and sacrifice. Kung Fu Soccer juggles all of these impulses with more grace than you'd expect, but there are moments where you can feel the strain of the juggling, where one genre needs compromise and others, where the film reaches for two different kinds of payoff simultaneously and lands somewhere in between. This is, I think, most apparent in the way the film handles its kung fu mythology. Throughout the movie, there are references to the spiritual and philosophical dimensions of martial arts, the idea that kung fu is not just a set of physical techniques but a way of understanding the world, of relating to energy and flow and opposition. These ideas are woven into the training scenes and the match sequences with varying degrees of success. When they're working, they add a layer of meaning that elevates the physical spectacle into something genuinely transcendent, the idea that Shuang's greatest skill isn't her kick or her speed but her ability to read the field the way a martial artist reads an opponent, to feel the flow of the game the way a Tai Chi master feels the flow of energy. When they're not working, they feel like philosophical fortune cookies, aphorisms dropped into dialogue that don't quite connect to the dramatic reality of the scene. The film has a character, an older figure associated with Qiu Feng's past, a kind of wandering martial arts sage, who shows up periodically to deliver wisdom that's clearly meant to deepen the thematic content but sometimes lands as padding. It's a fine line, and the film walks it with more success than failure, but the failures are noticeable precisely because the successes set such a high bar. But here's the thing, even when the philosophy is a little on the nose, even when the dialogue reaches for profundity and lands on platitude, the physical storytelling in Kung Fu Soccer is so strong that it carries you through. The way Shuang's body language changes over the course of the film, from the contained, slightly defensive posture of the early scenes to the flowing confidence of her peak to the rigid, self-conscious stiffness of her crisis to whatever comes after, is a performance told through movement as much as through facial expression or vocal delivery. The way the team's collective body language evolves, how they move in relation to each other, how their spatial dynamics on the pitch reflect their emotional bonds, is a masterclass in visual storytelling that uses the specific vocabulary of sport to communicate universal human truths. You don't need the dialogue to tell you that these women trust each other, because you can see it in the way they move without looking, in the instinctive way they cover for each other's weaknesses, in the synchronized physicality of a team that has become something more than the sum of its parts. And then there's the martial arts choreography itself, which is, and I've saved this for a dedicated moment because it deserves one, extraordinary. The fight sequences, and there are several standalone martial arts scenes separate from the football matches, are choreographed with a level of precision and artistry that puts many dedicated martial arts films to shame. There's a sequence where Qiu Feng demonstrates his style to the team, a solo performance that's part training exercise and part personal expression, and the camera films it in what appears to be a single continuous shot, again, probably hidden cuts, but the effect is seamless, that lets you see every movement in full, uncut physical context. No shaky cam, no rapid cutting to disguise limitations, just a performer moving through space with total command of their body and a camera operator tracking them with equal mastery. It's breathtaking. It's the kind of scene that makes you remember why martial arts cinema exists, why we film human bodies in motion, why the intersection of athleticism and artistry is one of cinema's most powerful tools. The integration of martial arts choreography into the football sequences is where the film's unique vision is most fully realized, and I want to describe one specific moment because it captures everything that's special about this movie. Late in the first half, during the match against the Japanese club that I mentioned earlier, there's a play that starts with Shuang receiving the ball near midfield. She's being closed down by two defenders. And the way she handles the pressure borrows directly from a martial arts concept, I'm going to call it sticky hands, the Wing Chun principle of maintaining contact with your opponent to read their intentions through touch. She doesn't dribble past the defenders in a conventional sense, instead, she engages with their pressure, absorbs it, redirects it, uses their momentum against them. The choreography here is filmed with a combination of wide shots that show the spatial dynamics and tight close-ups of feet and legs that emphasize the physical precision, and the result is a sequence that reads simultaneously as football and as martial arts, neither one dominant, both one. She threads a pass through a gap that shouldn't exist, and the receiver, the talented midfielder with the confidence problem, meets it with a first touch that has the delicacy of a tachi hand technique, cushioning the ball with the same principle of yielding and redirecting that the kung fu training emphasized. The ball settles, she takes a breath, she strikes, and the camera follows it all the way, through the air, past the goalkeeper's outstretched hand, into the top corner, and there's a moment of absolute silence before the net ripples, as if even the sound is holding its breath, and then the world explodes. I got chills just describing that. And I think that's the highest compliment I can pay to Kung Fu Soccer's action filmmaking. It creates moments so vivid that they imprint on your memory like lived experience. You remember the feel of the ball, the sound of the strike, the weight of the silence before the crowd erupts. You remember it the way you remember a goal you scored as a kid, or a fight you witnessed, or a moment of physical transcendence that made you feel, briefly, like the rules of the world had bent in your favor. But memory is complicated, and so is this film. Because the moments that stay with you from the second half are different in kind, they're the quiet ones, the painful ones, the ones where the characters are confronted with the limits of their own strength. I keep coming back to that rooftop scene, Shuang alone at dawn, because it's the fulcrum on which the entire emotional arc of the film balances. Everything before it is rising, everything after it is reckoning. And the fact that it's staged as a physical scene, she's moving, she's trying to practice, her body is engaged even as her spirit is breaking, makes it all the more powerful, because it shows us that the crisis isn't abstract. It's not just, she's sad. It's that she can no longer do the thing that defines her, the thing that connects her to Qiu Feng, the thing that made her team special. The failure is physical, spiritual, and relational all at once, and the film understands that these dimensions are inseparable. I want to circle back to something I said earlier, about the film's emotional reach exceeding its structural grasp, because I think this is the central tension in how you evaluate Kung Fu Soccer as a piece of cinema. There are moments in this film, the rooftop scene, the locker room confrontation, the Japanese club match, the mother-daughter kitchen conversation, that are as good as anything I've seen in any sports film, any martial arts film, any drama. They're directed with intelligence, performed with commitment, and staged with a visual and sonic sophistication that belies the film's genre packaging. And there are stretches between those moments where the pacing sags, where the dialogue loses specificity, where the screenplay's structural weaknesses become visible. The question is how you weigh those two realities against each other, and I think reasonable viewers will come down in different places. For me, the emotional peaks are high enough, and frequent enough, that they outweigh the valleys. But I understand viewers who find the inconsistency frustrating, who feel that a film this talented should be more disciplined in its construction, who want the structural integrity to match the emotional ambition. Those are valid critiques, and I won't dismiss them, because Kung Fu Soccer is a film that invites critical engagement precisely because it's reaching for something bigger than its genre requires. Now, I want to talk about something that I think is going to be a major talking point for viewers, and it's something I've been approaching from various angles but haven't directly named, the question of dependency. This is, at its deepest level, what Kung Fu Soccer is about. It's about what happens when you discover that the thing that made you extraordinary was given to you by someone else. It's about the terror of that discovery, and the question of whether borrowed greatness is still greatness. And it's about the journey from dependency to genuine self-possession, which is neither a straight line nor a guaranteed outcome. Shuang's arc embodies this theme with painful clarity. When Qiu Feng is with her, she's transcendent. When he leaves, she's broken. The film doesn't flinch from the uncomfortable implication that her peak performance was, in some meaningful sense, not entirely her own. And it doesn't offer an easy resolution. It doesn't say, she was great all along and just needed to believe in herself, because that would be a lie, and the film is too honest for that. What it seems to be working toward, and I say, seems, because I want to preserve some ambiguity for viewers who haven't seen it, is a more complicated and more truthful proposition, that what Qiu Feng gave her was real, and what she does with it after he's gone is also real, and the two things coexist in a way that doesn't reduce to a simple narrative of independence or dependence. This theme extends to the team as a whole. The MA players were transformed by Qiu Feng's methodology, and his absence forces them to confront the question of whether they can sustain that transformation without its source. And the film, to its credit, doesn't suggest that they simply need to find themselves. It shows them grappling with the possibility that some of what they gained is permanent and some of it was conditional, and that distinguishing between the two is one of the hardest and most necessary things a person, or a team, can do. I realize I've been going on for quite a while now, and I want to make sure I'm not wearing out my welcome. So let me start bringing some of these threads together before we get to the final stretch of the film. Kung Fu Soccer is a movie that announces itself as a genre exercise. Kung Fu meets football, sounds fun, sounds silly, sounds like a good time, and then, once it has you settled into that expectation, proceeds to deliver something substantially more ambitious and more emotionally complex than that description suggests. It's a film about the beauty of mastery and the terror of losing it. It's a film about the specific, painful dynamics of mentorship and gratitude and the way that helping someone can become a form of control, even with the best intentions. It's a film about women's bodies as instruments of power and art, shot with a gaze that's celebratory rather than objectifying. It's a film about the difference between performing and being, between borrowing and owning, between the self you construct with someone else's tools and the self you build from whatever's left after those tools are taken away. And it's a film that, for all its structural imperfections, gets under your skin in a way that more polished, more carefully constructed movies sometimes don't. Because it reaches. It swings for things that are bigger than it can comfortably handle, and even when it misses, the ambition of the attempt is moving in itself. There's a rawness to its emotional delivery that feels almost handmade, like a thing crafted with love and sweat and stubbornness rather than precision engineered for maximum efficiency. And in a film landscape that increasingly rewards efficiency and optimization, that rawness feels precious, even necessary. I want to talk now about the supporting performances, because I've focused primarily on the leads and I need to give the ensemble their due. The actresses playing the AMA team members bring a collective energy that's essential to the film's success, and several of them deliver individual moments that linger long after the credits roll. The goalkeeper, and I keep coming back to her, which tells you something about the performance, has this physical presence that the camera loves. She's tall, commanding, with a stillness in goal that contrasts beautifully with the explosive movement of the outfield players. There's a save she makes in one of the later matches that's choreographed like a martial arts block, the timing, the body position, the way she absorbs the impact and redirects it, and it's framed so perfectly that it becomes one of those images that lives in your visual memory. Her hand meeting the ball at the apex of its flight, her body called and then releasing, the ball spinning away to safety. It's a moment of athletic beauty that transcends its sporting context and becomes pure cinema. The talented midfielder with the confidence issues, I've mentioned her several times, and that's because her arc is one of the most satisfying in the film, even though it's more subtle than the central Shuang Qiufeng story. Her journey from tentative brilliance to established confidence is told primarily through physicality, the way she holds herself, the decisiveness of her movements, the shift from always looking for the safe pass to occasionally taking the audacious one. There's a moment late in the film where she does something on the pitch that she would never have attempted in the early scenes, and the camera catches Shuang watching from across the field with this expression of pride that's so genuine, so unperformed, that it feels like a real person watching a real teammate rather than an actress playing a reaction. It's the kind of moment that makes you feel the depth of the bonds these characters share, even across the distance of a football pitch. The team's coach, the one who was there before Qiufeng, has a scene in the second half that I think is one of the most quietly powerful moments in the film. After Qiufeng's departure, he has to step back into a leadership role that he's already acknowledged he's not equipped for, and there's a moment where he's giving a tactical talk before a match and you can see him reaching for the authority he doesn't have. He's not bad, he's not incompetent, he's just not Qiufeng, and he knows it, and the team knows it, and the film lets that knowledge sit in the room like a held breath. The performance is heartbreaking in its restraint, no dramatic breakdown, no grand speech, just a man doing his best with what he has and knowing it's not enough. And then, in a move that I think elevates the character from a plot function to a genuine person, he does something small and smart that shows he's been paying attention all along, that his value was never in being Qiufeng but in seeing things Qiufeng couldn't. It's a moment of quiet dignity that the film earns through patience and specificity. The rival teams, as I mentioned, are drawn with more care than you'd expect. The Korean team's captain, with her icy precision, is the most developed of the opponents, and there's a scene where she and Shuang meet off the pitch, in a hallway, a common area, one of those liminal spaces that sports films love, and have an exchange that's minimal in dialogue but loaded in subtext. They don't say much. They don't need to. The way they hold themselves, the way they assess each other with the quiet confidence of people who know exactly how good they are, the way there's respect without warmth and rivalry without animosity, it's all communicated through posture and eye contact and the space between words. It's a scene that could have been cut without affecting the plot but that enriches the film's world immeasurably, because it shows you that the competitive universe of this story is populated by fully realized people, not just obstacles for the protagonist to overcome. Let me take a moment to talk about one more craft element before I move into the film's final act territory, and that's the film's use of space, specifically, the way it contrasts interior and exterior environments to reflect the characters' emotional states. Exteriors in Kung Fu soccer are generally associated with freedom, possibility, and the joy of the sport. The pitch, the training grounds, the open air, these are the spaces where the characters are most fully themselves, most fully alive. Interiors, by contrast, become associated with confinement, conflict, and the complications that the sport can't resolve. The locker room where the confrontation happens. The hotel rooms where cracks appear. The kitchen where Shuang and her mother sit in the heaviness of unspoken history. The film maps its emotional geography onto its physical geography with consistent intelligence, so that you start to feel the shift from exterior to interior as a shift from light to shadow, from possibility to limitation. This spatial storytelling reaches its peak in a sequence I haven't yet discussed, which takes place in a temple, or what might be a temple, or a traditional martial arts school, the exact nature of which the film leaves slightly ambiguous. It's a space that's both interior and exterior, enclosed by walls but open to the sky, and it's where Q Feng goes after his departure from the team. We see him there alone, and the film photographs this space with a quality of light that's different from anything else in the movie, softer, more diffuse, almost timeless. He's practicing, and his movements in this space have a quality of meditation, of conversation with himself, that contrasts painfully with the energetic, outward-directed practice we saw when he was training the team. The camera stays wide, respectful of the space, and the sound design fills the silence with the subtle textures of the environment, wind through trees, distant water, the rustle of fabric. It's a scene that does nothing to advance the plot and everything to deepen our understanding of who Q Feng is when he's stripped of his role, his relationships, his purpose. It's contemplative, it's beautiful, and it's one of the clearest demonstrations of the film's visual and emotional maturity. And now I'm approaching the territory where Kung Fu soccer starts building toward its climactic stretch, and this is where I need to be most careful about spoilers, because the shape of the ending, while I won't reveal its specifics, is something that I think lands more powerfully if you experience its particular rhythm in real time. What I will say is that the film sets up a scenario where the MA team has to face their most formidable opponents yet, in the highest stakes match of the tournament, without the person who made them what they are. And the way the film handles the preparation for this match, the days and hours leading up to it, is some of the most assured and emotionally precise filmmaking in the entire project. There's a training session, and this is the last training sequence in the film, that functions as a mirror and a counterpoint to every training scene that came before. The team is practicing, going through drills, working on tactics, and on the surface it looks like any other session. But the camera finds these moments of hesitation, of reaching for something that isn't there, of looking toward the sideline where Q Feng used to stand. And then, gradually, something shifts. You can see it in the way the passes start connecting again, in the way the movement patterns start to resynchronize, in the way the players start trusting each other and themselves. It's not a sudden revelation, the film is too smart for that, but a slow, tentative reconnection with what they'd lost. The music in this scene is minimal, almost subliminal, just a low hum that builds gradually, and the editing lets moments breathe, lets the camera linger on faces that are finding their way back to confidence. It's a scene of recovery that feels earned rather than prescribed, and it sets the emotional foundation for everything that follows. Shuang, in the lead up to the final match, has a moment, and this is the last character beat I'll describe in detail, that brings together every thread the film has been weaving. She's alone, she's preparing, and she finds something, I'll be deliberately vague about what it is, that connects her to Qiu Feng, to her mother, to her team, and to herself. It's a physical object, or maybe a gesture, or maybe a place. The film handles it with a kind of sacred vagueness that suggests the specifics matter less than the emotional truth. And what she does with this moment is not dramatic, not grand, not cinematic in the traditional sense. It's quiet. It's private. It's the kind of thing that happens inside a person when they're deciding who they are, and it happens in the space between one breath and the next. The film trusts the actress to carry this moment with minimal support, no score, no dialogue, no visual effects, and she does, with a stillness and a depth of feeling that makes you hold your own breath without knowing why. I realize I've been going deep on the emotional and thematic layers of Kung Fu Soccer, and I want to make sure I'm also addressing the things that viewers often care about most in a film like this. Is it fun? Is it exciting? Does it deliver the genre goods? And the answer is emphatically yes. Even in its darker second half, even when the emotional stakes are at their highest, the film maintains a kinetic energy and a sense of physical joy that keeps it from becoming oppressively heavy. The match sequences, even the ones that the team is struggling through, are staged with a visceral excitement that puts you on the edge of your seat. The martial arts choreography, integrated into the football action, remains inventive and thrilling throughout. The pacing, while it has the soft spots I mentioned, never loses its forward momentum entirely. And the humor, which does diminish as the drama intensifies, reappears in unexpected moments with a warmth and timing that catch you off guard and remind you that even in the darkest stretches, these are people who know how to laugh, who find lightness where they can. There's a moment in the preparation for the final match where one of the players does something so completely unexpected, so tonally outside the emotional register of the surrounding scenes, that the whole team, and the audience, breaks into laughter. It's not a joke at the film's expense, it's a human moment, a pressure valve, a reminder that even when everything is serious, life doesn't stop being absurd. And the film earns this moment precisely because it hasn't been forcing comedy where it doesn't belong. The laughter feels like a gift, like a release, like the characters giving themselves permission to be imperfect and silly even in the face of enormous stakes. It's a small moment, maybe 30 seconds. But it does more to humanize the team than any amount of dramatic dialogue could. I want to take a step back now and talk about Kung Fu Soccer in the context of its release year and the broader landscape of sports cinema and martial arts cinema in 2026. This is a film that arrives at a moment when both genres are, in different ways, searching for new energy. Sports films have been dominated for years by a certain template, the inspirational underdog story, the biopic of a famous athlete, the story of overcoming adversity through competition, and while there's nothing inherently wrong with these templates, they've become so familiar that they often feel more like obligations than inspirations. Martial arts cinema, meanwhile, has been in a kind of identity crisis, caught between the legacy of the great Hong Kong masters and the demands of modern blockbuster filmmaking, with fewer and fewer films finding the sweet spot between physical poetry and emotional substance. Kung Fu Soccer, for all its imperfections, feels like a genuine attempt to breathe new life into both traditions by combining them, and the fact that the combination produces something that feels fresh and specific rather than gimmicky is a real achievement. The film also arrives in a cultural moment where women's sports are receiving unprecedented attention and investment globally, and Kung Fu Soccer taps into that energy without being didactic about it. The film's feminism, and it is, without question, a feminist film, is expressed through its gaze, its camera, its refusal to qualify or diminish its female characters' physical and emotional power. It doesn't need to make speeches about equality because it demonstrates equality through every frame, through the way it films women's bodies as sites of strength and skill and beauty, through the way it treats its female characters' stories as worthy of the same cinematic grandeur that male stories have always received. This isn't a film about women fighting for recognition, it's a film about women who already know their worth and are engaged in the much harder fight of living up to their own potential. And in 2026, that feels not just timely but necessary. But I don't want to make Kung Fu Soccer sound like a message film, because it's not. It's a story first, and a very entertaining one. The genre pleasures are real and abundant. The martial arts sequences are thrilling. The football matches are riveting. The humor is genuine and well-placed. The romance, or whatever you want to call the thing between Shuang Shuang and Qiu Feng, has the kind of charged, ambiguous energy that keeps you guessing and keeps you invested. And the supporting characters are vivid enough to sustain your interest even when the main storyline is in its slower passages. It's a film that works as pure entertainment even when its deeper ambitions are straining, and that's a testament to the skill and charisma of everyone involved in its making. So where does that leave us? I've spent a lot of time with this movie, more than I expected, honestly, and I find that my feelings about it are more complicated than I anticipated going in. Kung Fu Soccer is not a perfect film. Its screenplay has rough patches. Its second-half pacing has slow spots. Its thematic ambitions occasionally outstrip its narrative discipline. But it is, without reservation, a memorable one. It's a film that reaches for something, a fusion of physical spectacle and emotional depth, of genre pleasure and thematic substance, of entertainment and art, and even when it doesn't quite grasp what it's reaching for, the reaching itself is beautiful to watch. It's the kind of film you leave thinking about, arguing about, wanting to watch again. It's the kind of film that creates moments so vivid they become part of your internal cinema, images and sounds and feelings that you carry with you long after the credits roll. And Shuang Shuang, the character, the performance, is the reason it all works. Without her, Kung Fu Soccer would be an interesting experiment. With her, it's something more. She's the emotional center, the physical embodiment of the film's themes, the human face of its grandest ambitions. The actress playing her delivers a performance that's physically extraordinary and emotionally transparent, and she does it with a naturalness that makes the film's more heightened moments feel grounded in reality. She makes you believe that a person can be broken by loss and rebuilt by determination. She makes you believe that the body remembers what the mind forgets. She makes you believe that greatness is both given and earned, both borrowed and owned, and that the space between those contradictions is where the most interesting lives are lived. I keep thinking about that dawn rooftop scene. The light, the solitude, the body moving through forms that connect to a memory of connection. The stumble. The stillness. The wind. It's the kind of scene that tells you everything you need to know about what this film is trying to be, even when it doesn't fully succeed. It's reaching for transcendence through physicality. It's using the body as a language for the soul. It's saying that the most important battles are the ones that happen inside us, in the spaces between breaths, in the moments when we decide whether to keep moving or to stop. And in those quiet, devastating, achingly human moments, Kung Fu Soccer transcends its genre, transcends its premise, transcends its imperfections, and becomes something genuinely special. A flawed film, yes. A beautiful one, absolutely. And one that I think will stay with me, and with you, if you give it the chance, for a long, long time. I want to zoom in on a few more specific moments before I continue pulling back for the bigger picture, because I think the details of how Kung Fu Soccer handles its key scenes reveal as much about its strengths and weaknesses as any broad analysis. I'm realizing that I've been at this for quite some time, and I want to start gathering my thoughts into a more cohesive assessment, but I also want to make sure I haven't left anything important unsaid. Let me do a quick mental inventory. Story: ambitious, emotionally powerful, structurally rough in places. Characters: richly drawn leads, strong ensemble, occasionally underwritten backstory. Acting: committed, physical, emotionally transparent, with standout work from the leads. Direction: confident, visually intelligent, occasionally over-reliant on established formulas. Cinematography: beautiful, purposeful, with a clear visual language that serves the story. Editing: rhythmic, intelligent, with a few pacing issues in the second half. Music: innovative in concept, variable in execution, with moments of genuine brilliance. Sound design: exceptional, one of the film's most consistently impressive elements. Visual effects: effective when restrained, occasionally too much. Themes: rich, relevant. And I admire the film's willingness to engage with these ideas even when the engagement is uneven. Kung Fu Soccer doesn't always succeed in integrating its philosophical content with its dramatic content, but the fact that it's trying, that it's reaching for a depth of meaning that goes beyond the genre's typical boundaries, is itself a kind of success. It's the difference between a film that entertains you and a film that moves you, between a film you watch and a film that stays with you, between a film that's good and a film that matters. Kung Fu Soccer, at its best, is a film that matters, and even when it falls short of its own ambitions, the ambition itself is worth celebrating. I want to take one more moment to talk about the film's cultural significance, because I think it's important context for understanding what Kung Fu Soccer is and why it exists. This is a film that draws on to deep wells of Chinese cultural tradition, martial arts and sport, and combines them in a way that's both respectful of tradition and genuinely innovative. The martial arts sequences are choreographed with an awareness of real kung fu principles that goes beyond surface-level aesthetic borrowing. You can see the influence of specific schools and styles in the way characters move, and the philosophical content reflects a genuine engagement with martial arts thought. The sports sequences, similarly, show a real understanding of women's football, the tactics, the physicality, the culture, that grounds the more fantastical elements in a recognizable reality. But what I find most culturally significant about the film is the way it positions women at the center of a narrative that draws on traditionally male-dominated cultural traditions. Martial arts cinema, historically, has been dominated by male stories and male bodies. Sports cinema, similarly, has given disproportionate attention to male athletes and male teams. Kung Fu Soccer takes these traditions, claims them for its female characters, and in doing so, suggests that the values they embody, discipline, mastery, courage, the pursuit of excellence, are not gendered. This isn't a feminist reclamation in the aggressive, confrontational sense, it's a quiet, confident assertion that these stories belong to everyone, that women's bodies are as capable of transcendence as men's, that the camera's gaze, when it's the right gaze, can celebrate female physicality without diminishing it. And in the context of 2026, when conversations about representation and inclusion in cinema are ongoing and sometimes contentious, Kung Fu Soccer offers a model of how to do it right, not by making a statement, but by telling a story so compelling that the statement makes itself. Alright, I've been going on for a very long time now, and I want to start moving toward the broader assessment that will, eventually, lead to my final verdict on this film. But I'm not there yet. There's more to discuss, more moments to revisit, more angles to explore. Let me talk about rewatchability, because I think that's an important quality for any film, and it's one that Kung Fu Soccer handles in an interesting way. This is, I believe, a film that rewards rewatching, but not in the way you might expect. It's not a film packed with Easter eggs and hidden details that you'll catch on a second viewing. It's not a puzzle box narrative that requires multiple watches to fully understand. What it offers on rewatching is something more subtle, the ability to see the emotional architecture from the outside, to understand where the film is going and to appreciate the care with which it builds toward its destination. On first viewing, the first half's joy and the second half's pain hit you with the force of surprise. On rewatching, knowing what's coming, you can appreciate the craft, the way specific moments in the early scenes foreshadow the later ruptures, the way visual and sonic motifs are established and then transformed, the way character behaviors that seem merely characteristic on first viewing become, with hindsight, clearly motivated by the dynamics that will eventually surface. It's like rereading a great novel. The plot doesn't surprise you anymore, but the construction becomes visible, and the appreciation shifts from what happens to how it's built. And the construction, despite the rough patches I've noted, is more thoughtful and more deliberate than it might initially appear. The performances, too, benefit from rewatching. The lead's work is layered enough that knowing the destination changes how you read the journey. Qiu Feng's early interactions with Shuang, viewed with knowledge of the eventual rupture, gain a tragic dimension that wasn't visible on first viewing. His intensity reads differently, still charismatic, still compelling, but with an undercurrent of need, of investment that's too deep, of a man who's giving himself to this project because his own past left him empty. And Shuang's early confidence, her easy absorption of his teaching, her growing mastery, viewed in retrospect, these take on a quality of beautiful fragility, like a flower in perfect bloom that you know is about to be caught in a storm. The performances are rich enough to support these different readings, and that richness is one of the clearest signs of the film's quality. I want to make one more observation about the film's structure before I start moving toward conclusion territory, and it's something that's been nagging at me throughout this review. The film runs a certain length. It's not a short film, it asks for a significant investment of time, and while I generally think it earns that length, there are moments when you feel the runtime. Not in the action sequences, which are invariably engaging, and not in the major dramatic scenes, which are riveting, but in the connective tissue between them, the transitional scenes, the setup scenes, the moments that move characters from point A to point B. Some of these scenes are good. Some are merely functional. And the merely functional ones, in a film that's striving for transcendence in its peak moments, feel like missed opportunities. They're not bad. They're just not as alive as the best scenes around them, and the contrast can make them feel slower than they are. The film would benefit, I think, from being about 10 to 15 minutes shorter. Sometimes explored with more ambition than the screenplay can fully support. Overall, a film that's greater than the sum of its imperfect parts, carried by the power of its performances and the sincerity of its emotional vision. There's one more thing I want to talk about before I start wrapping up my analysis, and it's something that I think will be central to how this film is received and remembered: the ending. I'm not going to tell you what happens. I've been disciplined about spoilers throughout, and I'm not going to break that now, but I want to talk about the ending's emotional quality, because it's the thing that's stayed with me most since I watched the film, and it's the thing that I think will generate the most conversation. The final stretch of Kung Fu Soccer is, I think, where the film's tonal ambitions are most fully realized and also most severely tested. The last match is staged with a combination of physical spectacle and emotional interiority that pushes the film's visual language to its limits. The editing cuts between the external reality of the match and the internal realities of the characters in a way that's disorienting in the best sense. You are watching a football game and an emotional reckoning simultaneously, and the two dimensions inform and enrich each other. The choreography of the match itself is the most elaborate and the most inventive in the film, incorporating martial arts techniques that are more stylized and more fantastical than anything in the earlier sequences. The sound design reaches its peak intensity, layering and stripping and rebuilding the soundscape with a confidence that suggests a team at the top of its craft. But what really makes the ending land, or what almost makes it land, depending on your perspective, is the emotional resolution it offers its characters. And this is where I think the film will be most divisive, because the resolution is not simple, not clean, not the triumphant tying up that the sports genre typically demands. It's ambiguous in a way that trusts the viewer to sit with complexity, to accept that some questions don't have answers, that some wounds don't fully heal, that some relationships can't be restored to what they were but can become something new. Whether you find this satisfying or frustrating will depend on what you want from a film like this. If you want catharsis and closure, you may feel shortchanged. If you want honesty and emotional truth, you may find it deeply moving. I'll say where I come down when we get to the final verdict, but for now, I want to leave you in the same uncertainty the film leaves its characters, because that uncertainty is part of what makes the ending linger. One of the things I find most compelling about the final stretch is how it brings back the film's central question, the question of dependency and selfhood, and answers it not with a speech or a single dramatic revelation but with a series of physical actions that embody the answer without ever articulating it in words. What Shuang does on the pitch in the final match is, in the film's symbolic language, both an acknowledgement of what Qiu Feng gave her and a declaration of what she's become in his absence. The choreography of these final moments tells you everything the dialogue doesn't, that she has internalized his teaching so completely that it's no longer his but hers, that the boundary between what was given and what was earned has dissolved, that she is, finally, the fully realized version of herself, not despite what happened, but because of it. And the final image, I'll say nothing about what it is, only about how it feels, is one of those endings that splits the difference between completion and continuation. It doesn't resolve everything. It doesn't answer every question. But it creates a feeling, a sense of where these characters are, emotionally, at this moment in their lives, that's specific enough to feel true and open enough to allow for the possibility that the story continues beyond the frame. It's the kind of ending that makes you sit in silence for a moment after the credits start, not because you are stunned, but because you need time to absorb what you felt. And in a genre that too often settles for easy triumph or manufactured tragedy, that kind of emotional complexity is a rare and valuable thing. Let me talk now about what Kung Fu Soccer means, or what I think it means, because interpretation is always personal and I want to be transparent about that. For me, the film is ultimately about the relationship between training and identity, between the things we learn from others and the things we discover about ourselves. It's about how the people who shape us become part of us, permanently, in ways we can't always see or control. And it's about the terrifying, exhilarating process of discovering who we are when we can no longer lean on the people who made us who we are. These are universal themes, obviously, they're not unique to sport or martial arts, but the film explores them through the specific vocabulary of physical mastery, and that specificity gives them a freshness and a visceral power that a more conventional treatment might lack. The Kung Fu metaphor works on multiple levels. On the surface, it's a training methodology, a set of techniques that improve football performance. But beneath that surface, it's a philosophy, a way of understanding the relationship between body and mind, between self and other, between effort and flow. And the film suggests that this philosophy, when genuinely absorbed, transforms not just how you play but how you exist in the world. The characters who fully embrace the Kung Fu approach to football don't just become better athletes, they become more fully themselves, more attuned to their bodies and their instincts, more capable of the kind of present-moment awareness that's essential both in martial arts and in life. And the characters who struggle, who can't let go of their old ways, who resist the transformation, who take the techniques without accepting the philosophy, find themselves limited not by ability but by resistance, by the part of themselves that's afraid of what they might become if they fully commit. This is heady stuff for a film that's being marketed on the strength of its action sequences and its genre premise. Not because it's bloated, it's not, but because the tightening would eliminate some of the transitional slack and increase the overall intensity of the experience. Every great film has a natural length, and Kung Fu Soccer's natural length might be slightly shorter than its actual length. But this is a minor critique in the context of a film that's doing so many things well, and I raise it more as a "this is what could have been even better" observation than as a genuine complaint. Now, let me talk about one of the most surprising things about Kung Fu Soccer, which is how well it handles its quieter, more human moments in the context of its louder, more spectacular ones. This is a film with flying kicks and impossible goals and slow-motion explosions of athletic brilliance, and it also has a scene where two women sit at a kitchen table and try to bridge a gap that's been growing for years. It has sequences of martial arts choreography that rival anything in dedicated action cinema, and it also has a moment where a character stands alone on a rooftop and confronts the silence where a relationship used to be. The film's ability to hold these different registers simultaneously, to be both a spectacle and an intimacy, is one of its most remarkable qualities, and it's what elevates Kung Fu Soccer from a genre exercise to something approaching genuine art. The intimacy is what I keep coming back to. For all its physical grandeur, for all its genre ambition, for all its thematic reach, Kung Fu Soccer is at its most powerful in its smallest moments. The touch between two characters that means more than any dialogue. The glance across a crowded room that carries the weight of shared history. The breath before a decision. The silence after a loss. These are the moments that make the film memorable, that distinguish it from the dozens of other genre films that come and go each year without leaving a trace. And they're the moments that make me believe that Kung Fu Soccer, whatever its flaws, is a film worth discussing, worth remembering, worth arguing about. I want to circle back to something I said very early in this review, about the moment where the camera holds on Shuang's face after she's done something that shouldn't be possible, because I think that moment is the key to understanding what this film is really about. It's not about Kung Fu. It's not about football. It's not about the Champions League or the tournament bracket or the final score. It's about the moment when a human being exceeds their own understanding of themselves, when the body does something the mind didn't plan, when the training and the talent and the trust and the love all converge in a single instant of perfect expression. It's about transcendence, not the supernatural kind, but the human kind, the kind that happens when preparation meets opportunity meets courage meets grace. And in that moment, Shuang's face says everything, the wonder, the fear, the recognition that she's crossed a threshold she can't uncross. She's become something new, and the old her is gone, and the new her is both more and less than she expected. That's what Kung Fu Soccer is about, in the end. Becoming. The terrifying, beautiful, irreversible process of becoming someone you didn't know you could be, and the equally terrifying question of whether the person you become is really you or just a reflection of the people who shaped you. The film doesn't answer that question, not definitively, not finally, but it explores it with enough depth and enough sincerity that the exploration itself is worthwhile. And that, more than any spectacular goal or any perfectly choreographed fight, is what makes Kung Fu Soccer a film worth seeing. So, we are approaching the point where I need to give you my final thoughts, my verdict, my recommendation. But I want to do something first, because I think it's important for the kind of honest, thorough review I try to make here on Jonota News. I want to sit with my feelings for one more moment before I try to organize them into judgments. Because the truth is, Kung Fu Soccer is a film that resists easy judgment. It's a film that's simultaneously very good and not quite good enough, simultaneously deeply moving and occasionally frustrating, simultaneously ambitious and inconsistent. It's a film that I loved in moments and felt restless during other moments, that I admired for its reach and wished had been steadier in its grasp, that I'll remember for its peaks even though I know the valleys are there too. And maybe that's the most honest thing I can say about it. Kung Fu Soccer is a great film that isn't always a good one, and a good film that isn't always a great one. The greatness is in its emotional vision, its physical storytelling, its commitment to its characters, its refusal to settle for genre convention. The goodness, or the occasional lack of it, is in its screenplay, its pacing, its structural discipline, its tonal consistency. The question of which matters more, the vision or the execution, the ambition or the consistency, is a question that each viewer will answer differently, and I respect that. For my part, I come down on the side of the vision. I'd rather watch a film that reaches for the extraordinary and occasionally stumbles than a film that plays it safe and never falters. I'd rather be moved and frustrated in alternation than be consistently, safely, forgettably entertained. I'd rather leave a theater with complicated feelings and a head full of images than with a simple thumbs up and a vague sense of pleasantness. And Kung Fu Soccer gave me complicated feelings and a head full of images, and for that, I'm grateful. I'm going to hold off on my specific rating and detailed recommendation for a few more minutes, because I want to make sure I've covered everything that matters. Let me talk about the film's legacy potential, where it might sit in the broader landscape of sports cinema and martial arts cinema in the years to come. I think Kung Fu Soccer will be remembered as a film that was ahead of its time in some ways and behind its potential in others. Its gender politics, its visual innovation, its willingness to blend genres and tones, its insistence on taking women's sports seriously, these things will age well, and I think the film will be increasingly appreciated as these values become more mainstream. Its structural weaknesses. From their failures and their triumphs, and the film treats this learning process with a seriousness and a tenderness that moved me more than I expected. Shuang learns that strength is not the same as invulnerability. Qiu Feng learns that teaching someone to be great doesn't make you great. The team learns that unity is not the absence of conflict but the willingness to work through it. The coach learns that leadership isn't about having the answers but about creating the conditions for others to find their own. These are simple lessons, maybe, but the film delivers them not as morals but as experiences. You watch the characters learn these things, and in watching, you learn them too, or you remember learning them, or you recognize the places in your own life where you still need to learn them. That's the magic of great storytelling. It doesn't tell you what to think or feel, it creates a space where thinking and feeling happen naturally, where the experience of the characters becomes, through the alchemy of cinema, the experience of the viewer. Kung Fu Soccer isn't always great storytelling. But it's great storytelling often enough, and in the moments that matter most, that I'm willing to call it a great film, imperfect, inconsistent, frustrating, beautiful, moving, and alive. A film that has something to say about the human condition and says it through flying kicks and football goals and dawnlit sparring on rooftops and arguments in locker rooms and quiet moments in kitchens. A film that knows its own absurdity and uses it as a doorway to sincerity. A film that reaches for the extraordinary and, more often than not, touches it. I've been sitting with this film for a while now, turning it over in my mind, revisiting scenes and moments and feelings, and I find that my appreciation for it has only grown with time. The rough patches that bothered me on first viewing have softened. The peaks that thrilled me have crystallized. And the overall feeling, the aftertaste, if you will, has settled into something warm and complicated and deeply human. Kung Fu Soccer is not the best film I've seen this year. It's not the most polished. It's not the most consistent. But it might be the one that moved me the most, and it's definitely the one I've thought about the most since watching it, and those things count for a lot in my book. There's a temptation in reviewing to rank, to quantify, to reduce a complex experience to a number or a grade or a simple verdict. And I understand that temptation. Viewers want to know, quickly and clearly, whether a film is worth their time. But I also think that some films resist that reduction, and Kung Fu Soccer is one of them. It's a film that's more than the sum of its parts, where the parts don't always work but the whole somehow does, where the experience of watching it is greater than any accounting of its strengths and weaknesses can capture. And so, while I'll give you my verdict, I always do, I want to preface it by saying that the verdict is a starting point, not an ending. If anything I've said in this review resonates with you, if any of the scenes I've described sound like something you want to experience, then go see the film and make up your own mind. My job is to help you decide whether to take that chance, and I hope I've done that. Your experience will be your own, and it will be shaped by things I can't predict: your mood, your expectations, your history with these genres, your tolerance for imperfection. And that's as it should be. Okay. Deep breath. I've spent a long time with this film and with you, and I want to make sure the rest of our time together is as valuable as the time we've already spent. Let me start moving toward the final assessment, the verdict, the recommendation. But first, one more thing. Because there's always one more thing, isn't there? And this one is about the future. I don't know if Kung Fu Soccer will get a sequel, or if it should. The ending is satisfying enough to stand alone, but the world it creates is rich enough to sustain further exploration. If there is a sequel, I hope it maintains the emotional ambition of the original while addressing the structural weaknesses: tighter screenplay, more consistent pacing, deeper development of the supporting cast and the antagonists. I hope it keeps the same visual and sonic intelligence, the same commitment to authentic physicality, the same respect for its characters and its audience. And I hope it keeps the same willingness to be messy, to be imperfect, to be human. Because that messiness, that imperfection, that humanity, that's what makes Kung Fu Soccer special. Strip it away, and you might get a more polished product. But you'd lose the thing that makes it matter. I also want to say, and this is a small thing but I think it's important, that the film's title is perfect. Kung Fu Soccer. Simple, descriptive, a little bit absurd, a little bit wonderful. It tells you exactly what you are getting while not telling you at all, because the Kung Fu and the Soccer are just the surface. The real film is about everything that happens when you combine them, which is to say, everything that happens when human beings commit to a shared vision and discover what they're capable of together and alone. The title is a door. What's behind it is bigger than you expect. I think I've been thorough enough in my analysis that you have a clear sense of what Kung Fu Soccer is, what it's trying to be, how well it succeeds, and where it falls short. I've praised its performances, its choreography, its visual storytelling, its sound design, its emotional ambition, and its thematic depth. I've critiqued its screenplay, its pacing, its structural consistency, its occasional over-reliance on formula, and its moments of tonal imbalance. I've tried to be fair, honest, and specific, because I think that's what you deserve and what the film deserves. A film this ambitious and this affecting deserves more than a simple thumbs up or down. It deserves engagement with what it's trying to do and how well it does it, with what it means and how it makes you feel. And now, I want to talk about one final aspect that I realize I haven't given enough attention to, the film's relationship with hope. Because for all its pain, for all its conflict, for all the rupture and loss and uncertainty at its center, Kung Fu Soccer is a fundamentally hopeful film. Its occasional pacing issues, its inconsistent screenplay, these things will probably be less forgiven as the initial excitement fades and critical distance increases. But on balance, I think the film's legacy will be positive, and I think it will be remembered as one of the more interesting and ambitious sports films of its era. I also think it will be remembered for its central performance. Whoever plays Shuang, and I've been deliberately focusing on the character and the performance rather than the specific actress, because I want to keep the focus on the work, delivers something that transcends the film around her. It's a performance of physical brilliance and emotional transparency that's rare in any genre, and it's the kind of work that, in a just world, would be recognized and celebrated at the highest levels. The physical training alone, the martial arts, the football, the integration of both, represents an enormous investment of time and body, and the emotional work, the interiority, the vulnerability, represents an equally enormous investment of spirit. The combination is extraordinary, and it's the engine that powers the entire film. Let me also say a word about the director, because while I've praised specific directorial choices throughout this review, I haven't given a full accounting of the directorial vision. This is a film directed with confidence and intelligence, with a clear visual and emotional language that's consistent even when the screenplay wobbles. The director understands how to use the camera to tell a story, how to let a scene breathe, how to create emotional space within physical spectacle. The match sequences are directed with a dynamism that never becomes chaotic. The character scenes are directed with a stillness that never becomes inert. The tonal shifts are managed with a grace that occasionally stumbles but never falls. It's strong, assured work, and it suggests a filmmaker with a genuine vision and the skill to realize it. And the choreography team, I haven't given them enough credit. The integration of martial arts and football in this film is a genuine technical achievement, and it required a choreographic approach that's essentially unprecedented. The people who designed the movement for this film, the martial arts choreographers, the football coordinators, the dancers and physical performers who brought the sequences to life, have created something that's never quite existed before, and they've done it with a level of skill and imagination that deserves recognition. The physical storytelling in Kung Fu Soccer is as important as the verbal storytelling, and in some scenes more so, and the choreography team is responsible for a significant portion of the film's power. Now, I realize that in my effort to be thorough, I've been going on for a very, very long time, and I want to make sure that I'm not testing the patience of even the most dedicated viewer. So let me start gathering the threads and moving toward a more concise assessment. But I want to do one more thing before I get there, which is to talk about the film from the perspective of different kinds of viewers, because I think Kung Fu Soccer will land differently depending on what you bring to it. If you are a sports fan, specifically a women's football fan, this film will probably resonate with you on a level that goes beyond entertainment. The respect with which the sport is portrayed, the realism of the match dynamics, the understanding of the culture and the community, these things will feel validating and exciting. You'll probably forgive the film's genre excesses more easily because the foundation is so solid, and you'll appreciate the rare sight of women's sport being given this kind of cinematic treatment. You might also be more critical of the moments when the martial arts elements push the sport into fantasy territory, and that's a fair response, but I think the overall effect will be one of excitement and pride. If you're a martial arts film fan, you'll appreciate the choreography and the philosophical content, but you might also be frustrated by the way the martial arts elements are subordinated to the sport's narrative. The kung fu in this film is a means to an end. It serves the story and the characters, rather than an end in itself, and if you come looking for pure martial arts cinema, you'll find it only in glimpses. But those glimpses are extraordinary, and the integration with football produces moments of physical beauty that are unlike anything you've seen in a traditional martial arts film. If you are a general film fan, someone who loves good cinema regardless of genre, I think Kung Fu Soccer will appeal to you most in its quietest and most emotionally ambitious moments. The performances, the visual storytelling, the thematic depth, these things transcend genre and speak to the universal human experience of growth and loss and self-discovery. You might find the action sequences excessive, or you might find them thrilling. Either way, the emotional core of the film is strong enough to sustain your interest even when the spectacle isn't your thing. And if you are someone who doesn't usually watch either sports films or martial arts films, who came to this review curious but uncertain, well, I'd say give it a chance. Not because it's perfect, because it's not. Not because it will convert you to a genre you don't usually enjoy, because it might not. But because it's a film that's trying to be more than its genre, that's reaching for something genuinely human in the midst of its spectacular premise, and that kind of ambition deserves to be met with an open mind. You might love it. You might like it. You might respect it without loving it. But I don't think you'll be bored, and I don't think you'll regret the time. I want to take one final look at the film's thematic resonance before I deliver my verdict, because I think there's a layer of meaning that I haven't fully explored, and it's one that might be the most personal and the most universal thing about the film. Kung Fu Soccer is, at its deepest level, a film about learning. Not just learning Kung Fu, not just learning football, but learning how to be a person in relation to other people. Every character in this film is learning something, from each other, from their experiences. Not naively hopeful, not cheaply hopeful, the film earns its hope through suffering and struggle, but genuinely, deeply, indelibly hopeful. It believes in the capacity of people to grow. It believes in the power of physical mastery as a form of self-expression and self-knowledge. It believes that the bonds we form, even the ones that break, leave us richer than we were before. And it believes that the human body, pushed to its limits and guided by discipline and love, is capable of moments of beauty that transcend the ordinary and touch something universal. This hope is the film's emotional spine, and it's what prevents the darker second half from becoming oppressive or nihilistic. Even at its lowest points, even when Shuang is standing alone on that rooftop, even when the team is fracturing and the tournament is slipping away and everything that was built is crumbling, even then, the film holds space for the possibility of recovery, of reinvention, of becoming something new from the wreckage of what was. And that space, that breath of hope in the midst of despair, is what transforms Kung Fu Soccer from a good film into a film that matters. Because hope, real hope, isn't the absence of suffering. It's the belief that suffering can be transformed into something meaningful, that the broken pieces can be reassembled into a new pattern that's different from the original but no less beautiful. And Kung Fu Soccer, in its best moments, embodies that belief with a conviction that's impossible to resist. I think what I'm trying to say, after all these thousands of words, is that Kung Fu Soccer did something to me that I didn't expect. I went in expecting an entertaining genre exercise, a fun time at the movies, a pleasant way to spend a couple of hours. And I got that. The film is entertaining, it is fun, it is a pleasant way to spend time. But I also got something more, something I wasn't prepared for, a genuine emotional experience, a film that made me think about my own relationships, my own dependencies, my own journey from learning to self-possession. A film that reminded me why we tell stories in the first place, not just to entertain, but to illuminate, to connect, to make us feel less alone in the bewildering experience of being human. And that's why I keep coming back to that rooftop scene. Shuang, alone at dawn, moving through forms that connect her to someone she's lost. The stumble. The stillness. The wind. It's a scene about loss, yes, but it's also a scene about persistence, about the body's refusal to forget, about the spirit's refusal to give up, about the quiet, stubborn, beautiful human insistence on continuing even when continuing seems impossible. And in that insistence, in that persistence, in that stubbornness, Kung Fu Soccer finds its heart. Not in the spectacular goals or the flying kicks or the tournament victories. In the stumble. In the stillness. In the wind. That's the film. That's what it is. That's what it means. And I think it's worth your time. I really do. Now, before I give you my final rating and recommendation, which I promise I'm actually going to do this time, I want to address one more thing that I think is relevant for viewers who are watching this review and trying to decide whether Kung Fu Soccer is for them. It's about expectations, and about the gap between what the marketing sells and what the film actually delivers. The trailers for Kung Fu Soccer, from what I've seen, emphasize the action, the comedy, the spectacle. They sell it as a fun, exciting, high-energy genre mashup, which it is, but it's also more than that. And if you go in expecting wall-to-wall entertainment without any emotional complexity, you might be caught off guard by the darker, more introspective second half. This isn't a bait-and-switch. The film's dramatic ambitions are visible from the early scenes, if you are paying attention, but the marketing does lean heavily on the genre elements, and I want to make sure potential viewers know that there's more here than meets the trailer. Similarly, if you are going in expecting a martial arts film in the traditional sense, extended fight sequences, a clear villain, a climactic battle, you'll find elements of that, but not in the configuration you might expect. The villain, insofar as there is one, is internal rather than external. The conflicts are as much about identity and dependency as they are about physical confrontation. And the climax is as much an emotional reckoning as it is an athletic contest. These things are features, not bugs. They're what make the film more than its genre, but they're worth knowing about before you sit down, so you can meet the film on its own terms. And if you are someone who just wants a good time, some laughs, some thrills, some beautiful physicality, Kung Fu Soccer delivers that too. The matches are exciting. The choreography is gorgeous. The humor is warm and well placed. You can absolutely enjoy this film as pure genre entertainment and come away satisfied. The deeper layers are there if you want them, but they're not required for enjoyment. The film works on both levels, and that dual functionality is one of its greatest strengths. Alright. I've been circling long enough. It's time for the verdict. It's time to tell you what I think, plainly and directly, after all this analysis and reflection and emotional processing. I've taken you through the film's story, its characters, its performances, its craft, its themes, its strengths, and its weaknesses. I've told you what moved me and what frustrated me, what I admired and what I wished had been better. I've tried to give you a complete, honest, nuanced picture of what it's like to watch Kung Fu Soccer, and I hope I've succeeded. The verdict, then. Kung Fu Soccer is a film I recommend, heartily and without significant reservation. It's not perfect, I've been clear about that, and I stand by it. Its screenplay has rough patches. Its pacing has slow spots. Its tonal balance isn't always stable. But it's a film with enormous heart, genuine vision, spectacular physicality, and emotional depth that catches you off guard and stays with you long after you've left the theater. It's a film that takes its genre seriously and uses it as a vehicle for something more meaningful than genre typically delivers. It's a film with performances that are worth seeing, the physical commitment, the emotional transparency, the lived-in specificity of the character work. It's a film with craft, visual, sonic, choreographic, that's impressive by any standard and remarkable within its genre context. And it's a film that has something to say about the human experience, about growth and loss and dependency and selfhood, that feels genuine and earned and worth hearing. On my personal scale, and I want to emphasize that this is my assessment, shaped by my tastes and my values and my particular way of experiencing cinema, I'd give Kung Fu Soccer a strong 7.5 out of 10, trending upward toward 8 on rewatches. The peaks are 9s and 10s. The valleys are 5s and 6s. The average lands at a very solid, very recommendable 7.5. For context, that puts it above most genre films I've seen this year and in conversation with the best sports films and martial arts films of recent memory. It's not a masterpiece, it's too inconsistent for that, but it's the kind of film that makes you excited about what cinema can do when it's ambitious and brave and willing to take risks. Who should watch it? Honestly, almost anyone. If you like sports films, martial arts films, character-driven drama, women's stories, or films that blend genres in surprising ways, you'll find something to enjoy here. If you are open to emotional complexity and don't need every question answered and every conflict resolved, you'll appreciate what the film is doing. If you value performances and physicality and visual storytelling, you'll be richly rewarded. If you need perfect structure and consistent pacing and airtight screenwriting above all else, you might find the rough patches frustrating, but I think the peaks are high enough to justify the journey. Who might not like it? If you are looking for pure action with no emotional weight, the second half might feel slow. If you are looking for a straightforward sports narrative without genre complications, the kung fu elements might feel distracting. If you are sensitive to tonal inconsistency and need a film to maintain a single register throughout, the shifts between comedy, drama, action, and introspection might feel jarring. And if you are looking for a clean, triumphant ending, which is a perfectly legitimate thing to want from a sports film, you might find the film's more ambiguous resolution unsatisfying. These are valid preferences, and I respect them, even though they don't align with my own experience of the film. For everyone else, for the curious, the open-minded, the emotionally adventurous, I say, see Kung Fu Soccer. Go in knowing that it's more than its trailer. Go in knowing that it has rough patches. Go in knowing that it's trying to be more than one thing and doesn't always succeed. And go in ready to be moved, because in its best moments, and there are many, Kung Fu Soccer is the kind of film that reminds you why you fell in love with movies in the first place. The kind of film that makes you feel alive. The kind of film that stays with you, not because it's perfect, but because it's real. And that's my review of Kung Fu Soccer. Thank you for sticking with me through this deep dive. I know it's been long, but this is a film that deserved the time and the thought, and I hope you feel like the investment was worthwhile. If you enjoyed this analysis, if it helped you decide to see the film or enriched your experience of having seen it, then this video has done its job. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Jonota News is where we go deep on film and drama, every single time, no shortcuts, no clickbait, just honest, passionate engagement with the stories that move us. And drop your thoughts in the comments below. I want to know what you think about Kung Fu Soccer, whether you agree with me or disagree, whether you loved it or didn't, whether the rooftop scene hit you the way it hit me. Let's talk about it. That's what we are here for. Until next time, take care of yourselves, watch something that moves you, and I'll see you in the next one.